Hello and welcome to another episode of Guitar and Pen, a songwriter's notebook. I'm your host, Mark Will, author, songwriter, and publisher in permanent exile, currently based on the island of Taiwan. Today I'm going to talk songwriting with Lionel Doe. Lionel is the creative force behind So Dirty the Flamingos, a Toronto-based musical project which recently achieved the landmark milestone of 100,000 listens on Spotify with their song Miles Away. Welcome.
Man, how are you?
Good. It's been a while. Haven't seen you for I don't know how long.
I would say 20 years, maybe 18, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is good to see you.
yeah. Unbelievable. Here we are.
Yeah.
Well, as I say, I'm in Taipei and Lionel is in Toronto. Looks like he's in a bunker somewhere, an underground studio with drums in the back.
You like that? What you
I
can't see
do.
is there's a bathroom right 3 steps away, which is very necessary sometimes.
Absolutely.
When you lock yourself down and you're in studio mode. So I made
Yeah.
sure that I was close to the bathroom. So if,
Well,
if there's any...
since I'm seeing that now, what's your setup like down there? Are you in a basement actually, or?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There was some renovations to the house a couple years ago. And part of the deal was that I get to section off part of the house for me. So we moved a lot of the children's toys and doll houses out and built a wall. And behind this wall is, well, it was me. And then my son took up drums. So those are his drums behind me, which he bangs out quite effectively, I should add. And it's really just a demo studio. It's for me to write, and I do record guitars here on the master recordings, but other than that, it's just ideas. And then there's another studio owned by the bass player where we do all the tracking, the drums, bass, increasingly more guitars. I like more live amp situations these days. I was tracking through, and we'll probably get into this, but just through the computer, just through Logic. I was doing that for a bit, but I think I want to expand and just use this as the writing module. So that's it. It's a bunker, and yeah, a lot of stuff gets done down here, and I love the solitude. It's really nice, and just having that room kind of gives you the permission to use it. So that's what I've been doing.
Very good. Well, tell us about the name of this project, So Dirty the Flamingos. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's not as interesting as you might think. I don't know is the answer primarily, but I do remember when I came up with it, and it was it was just a project. I still just call it a project, but now it's a 6-year multi-band or multi-personnel project. But when it was conceptualized, it was really just me taking my demos and making a record out of it as a solo project, because I was in another band as a guitar player. Now, that part of what my personality is, I guess, is just grabbing a bone and not letting go of it. And what happened was that project just became a band and became gigs and became a record and an LP and then successive records after that. But I didn't know that. Long story short, I'm driving home after a very long midnight shift, and for some reason I have this rhythm in my head. It's the da 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 da. Doesn't make sense to me, but if you work night shift for a long time, your mind starts to deteriorate, and I think that's what was happening. And that da 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 became So Dirty the Flamingos, and I was just playing with words in my head, and it was more of a surrealist exercise, and it came up to me. Now, what I didn't do, and what I recommend all people that are naming their bands, is to take a quick look on Urban Dictionary before you name your bands, because what I was told by other more bass elements of my band was that, oh, do you mean Dirty Flamingo? And I'm like, what's that? And then they proceeded to open up Urban Dictionary and told me all about it, which is disgusting. And it wasn't at all the idea of the name of the band. And I do find myself having to correct people. And I'm not going to get into it, but listeners, if you have Urban Dictionary at your disposal, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that was not the intention.
We'll put that in the show notes. I have no idea what that means, but I'll look it up afterwards. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about this song "Miles Away," which now has 100,000 listens on Spotify.
So that song is an old demo I had, but the idea of it really hasn't changed. But it's one of those songs that people kind of interpret and project meaning on, which is fine, which is great. I love that. And I know that because when it first hit the radio, a rock station in Toronto played it, and they had this long introduction because they're doing a special on an independent band, so they're doing us a favor. But they put this long introduction to it, and they completely misread the song and talked about a story between a man and a woman, and it's not about that at all. But it's okay if you interpret it that way. But what it's actually about is just me as a family man, going out with my family all the time, going on these long walks, especially during COVID, which is when we recorded this, and not being there, not being present, always thinking about the song, always thinking about the next song, and people are talking to me, and I'm looking at them, but I'm not engaged in what they're saying. I'm always talking about that thing, so I'm always miles away, and a song that just can't wait. And it's always about the muse, always capturing the muse and never capturing the moment. And so it's a kind of a, how would you describe it? Cautionary tale almost, that, you know, as writers, I don't know if this is your experience or not, but I'm never really there. I'm always thinking about the next thing, and I'm thinking about that song that's nagging me, or the story idea, or the narrative, and how to make it better. And especially with music just permeates your mind, and it doesn't let go. And that's what that song is really about, is not being able to let go of the song.
Yeah, as artists of whatever kind, sometimes we're so focused on representing life that we forget to live life, forget to experience it fully. But I wonder if we don't represent life, or, you know, distill life experience into some kind of art form, are we fully experiencing life as, you know, artists should or do? That's the
Well, it's one of those age-old questions.
Conflict. Yeah.
How much do you engage in the muse, and how much do you engage in the present, and where do those two collide? And what can you really say about life if you're not really living it? But what time do you have to do the art that's commanded of you if you're not pursuing it? So I disagree with this. And as a young man, I toyed with this idea that you can't settle down, you can't live a normal life if you're going to pursue the arts. I don't think that's true. I really don't. And but that balance is pretty hard to find, and I think you're going to find it later in life usually. That was my case for sure. I put it all away and pursued a career and a family, only to have to pick it up at a certain point, and then achieve that balance. You have to. So that's kind of what the song's about. Not being present when you should be, or finding a way to compartmentalize the songwriting process so that it's not ever present. It's not always here. It should be part of your life, but to also just segregate it and say from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. I'm going to be a songwriter, and the rest of the day I'm going to, you know, be a dad and be a worker and get all those things done and drive people to practices. You know, it's just, that's not the way it works. So it permeates everything you do, in the car, listening to demos, driving around or walking around with your headphones on, listening to the latest mixes or ideas, or got your pen and paper and always writing down little snatches of lyrics. That's just the way it is. And I've accepted that at this point anyways.
Well, you mentioned a balance. Do you feel that you've achieved that balance between, workaday family duties and the following of the muse as you described it?
I think so. Unsuccessfully some days, successfully other days. You're always trying. But we've got, as this project, this is our 5th record that we're putting out. So I guess on some measure that's good. We managed to put out an EP every year. That's all we can do. That's working pretty hard, getting the life stuff down and then spending time doing the music. We do have rules. One of the rules in the band is families first. No music, gig, recording session trumps any kids' soccer practice or anything like that. That's just the rule, and that seems to work. Yeah.
So all members of the band have families of their own.
Yeah, historically, there's been some different band members. At one point, when we started off as the other band and I was just the lead guitar player, we were all dads. And so it was very much a dad band. And
right.
At present, there's 6 of us and 3 of us are parents.
Right.
But that's not to say that, that other people don't have responsibilities. They have pets and they have, other family members and stuff that they have to take care of. So it's always been, that's the rule. And so once you accept that, then you never get mad because that's just the rule. So
yeah,
those kinds of rules are good because then there's no discrepancy. Oh, but this is an important gig. No,
yeah,
it's not. It's nothing's that important, and that's the way we carried forward, and it seems to work.
Oh, very interesting.
Fights. Yeah.
How did that come about? Did you just from the outset you just laid down the law, or everyone sort of agreed by universal consensus that that's how it should be?
I guess more organically, yeah. Starting from that first band when we were all dads, I don't think anybody said it as law. It's just we had our little chat
obvious.
Groups. Yeah. And there might have been, some discontent at the time, and then you realize, no, organically this has become the rule. And by the time we were this project, between myself and the other front runner, the bass player, he's our producer and my songwriting partner, and together we kind of managed this band. I think it was agreed between us, even if it was silent agreement, that that's the rule. And so it's been, as soon as someone says, I'm sorry, I have to do this, then we always get back, nope, we know the rules, that's it. So it works out pretty well, actually, I gotta say, because then your family's happy and it allows you to continue your music work when that comes up as well.
I've got so many questions. I'm just wondering, do you think the routines actually help us be more creative? I mean, if we didn't have the routines, the duties, the responsibilities of family, work, and so on, would we be more or less creative? If we were just, full-time artists, full-time songwriters or authors or whatever, would that make us more prolific and productive and creative, or the reverse?
It's interesting. We don't know because we don't take that as a test to the nines and scientifically prove any of that. But in my experience,
because we can't, we have to pay the bills, don't we?
Yeah, no, but I mean, just as a general comparison, if you take somebody who's an artist full time, are they getting their best work all the time, or is it more of a targeted approach when they have to? There's a lot of procrastinators out there. Their best work is done the night before. So, as an argument for scheduling, as an argument for deadlines, and just being really pragmatic about those routines, I think there's an argument for the schedules on that sense. I mean, I mean, I've seen, if you just give everybody free reign, oh, don't worry about it, just get to it when you get to it.
Yeah.
I'll probably never get those files. I want those files by January 15th, and then I'll get the files. So are you getting the best work, or are you getting some work? Can you revisit it? Can you say, this is great, now that we have something to work on now, January 27th, I want those other files. You have to have deadlines. That's my experience. And you have to impose them. And yeah, it gets a little autocrat. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, it gets a little
dictatorial.
A little, yeah. But it really is just managing timelines, because your part isn't more important than another person's part, and they need your part before they can write their part. And I guess what I'm talking about here overall is multi-tracking and getting people to record in their home studios and send me stuff, and so we can put them together. Because that's the process we're in right now, and it's a lot of scheduling, it's a lot of back and forth.
Well, let's pick up on that dictatorial, authoritarian strand there. You're the boss, right? Like, So Dirty the Flamingos is your project. You're the creative force behind it. You're the main songwriter. Like, how does that dynamic play out in the composition process, the recording process, and I don't know, take it further, promotion, distribution? Yeah. Like, you're in charge, basically. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's my project in that it's I write the songs, I write the demos. The demos go to the band members. Ideally, we want to be in a room and bang them out together to see what happens. The arrangements may change at that point. Sometimes they don't. Rarely do they actually change at that moment, but everybody gets a feeling for their parts. And then we multi-track, and we start with the drums. And so the drummer needs a demo to play to, or we've done them both. We played live in his ears for him to lay down the drums. Or he's recently, I'm just playing to loop drums and muting those drums, and he plays to the demo. And that way we can get, because we're limited in our track numbers, we want to get as many tracks of his drums and a feed to his ears at the same time. And when you have an 8-track, which is what we're using, that means 7 tracks are used for drums and 1 track is used for either me playing or singing, and that's pretty limited, right? So if you play to a demo, then you have 8 tracks to record the drums. So 8 mics going in while he's listening to, a canned track. That's the process we're going with now. You lose a little bit of spontaneity when you do that, but if you've got a solid demo, then that's probably the best way to go with what we have. So that's our process now, and this is our 5th record, right? So we've tried and tested this technique a few times. We're limited in our studio in a lot of ways, like our preamps, and if you want a live environment, if you want to record like the Stones did and the band did, that's pretty ideal. That's live, but that's every instrument, every mic is going through a nice preamp. It's getting the treatment it deserves. You have engineers working pretty hard to make that happen. And when it's just us, it's just the band, that's tough to engineer and to manage. So that's the process. I record the demo to a loop. I add as many guitars and horns and whatever I want, and to make it pleasing to the drummer so he knows where to play. We give him a little bit of coaching, but not much. Our drummer is probably the best musician in the band, so he knows exactly what to do most of the time. Sorry, I gotta fix something. He's a pro, so I don't even know how many times he listens to the song. I'm suspicious that he listens to it once on the way to the studio and then picks it up. He's pretty good that way. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, is the fact that the band works because If I'm doing all that other work, the promotion, the gig, managing the gigs, managing everything that way, they're free to do their projects too. So that drummer, Devin, is in 5 bands right now. So
Yeah.
he's gigging every night, which is what he wants to do. He wants to play live. He doesn't want to sit around and wait for or have band meetings and discuss this stuff. So that works out. And I would say the same for the other musicians too. They have other projects.
Mm-hmm. They're all full-time gigging musicians, or they work other jobs?
Devin's a gigging musician. Scott, the organist, is in another band, and he's a studio cat. He loves tinkering with his equipment and studio stuff, and he's part of another band that's just a studio band. They just record all the time, which is pretty cool. It just keeps him fresh, keeps him engaged. If he had to wait for my songs every time, he'd probably be very much more a part-time musician. So it's nice that they have other things to do and explore and learn stuff in the studio and bring it back to us, or learn stuff on stage and bring it back to us. That's nice. And it keeps, at least Devin is very immersed in the scene, whereas I don't like to play live that much. I'll do it when I have to. Therefore, he's our live gigging guy, and I'm the studio /manager /songwriter. That's it. It's not about. It works for us.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into the pros and cons of playing live a bit later, but let's back up and talk about your relationship to the guitar. I mean, the title of this podcast is Guitar and Pen. Tell me about you began as a guitarist, right? Like before you even tried your hand at songwriting, before you picked up the pen, as it were, you were a sideman, an axeman. How did you get into that? Like, it started in your teens.
Yeah, well, if you want to know the whole story, it's a long story, but I was born in '73. That means when I picked up a guitar in the early '80s for the first time, I had a very specific goal, and that was to be Eddie Van Halen.
Yes,
that was the goal. So
exactly.
I emulated everything I could from him as a beginner.
Were you tapping?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had to wean myself off of that. That was a long process to not tap, right? But I had an identity crisis when I was 14, 15. I dressed like him. I wore my hair like him. Which is pathetic. But when you're a teenager, you don't know any better. And then I guess it was my first school trip to Europe when I was just kind of looking around, and a light bulb went in my head, and I went, no, you got to be your own self. You got to be an individual. And so at that point, I started to stray and listen to other music and try to develop my own style to some extent. So yeah, that was my trajectory into guitar, was very focused on being, the fastest gunslinger that I could in the 80s. And that was the culture then too, if you remember.
I remember very well. I have to ask, what's your favorite Van Halen album?
Women and Children First.
Okay, that's probably my number 2. I have to go with Fair Warning.
I was gonna say it's a tight contest with Fair Warning, but I'm also, and this gets me into trouble, I'm also a huge David Lee Roth fan. I think he brought more to the band than he ever got credit for, and that was the swing of the band, and that was the blues, and that was the R&B, and that was, without him, they were gonna be a very good Black Sabbath band. With him, all those covers that they did and all that swing and stuff, that's what made the band. That's what made you dance. And that's what I loved, is that, on one hand, the Van Halen brothers, and him, this clown, and together, they made amazing records. So I'm still a big fan. But yeah, that was everything to me back then. But then, when I learned that I will never be like that, which came pretty quickly, then I started just emulating the stuff that made sense to me. And so a lot of my very mediocre guitar playing comes from those not so bright shining stars, the Ace Frehleys and the pentatonic guys that just blues scales was good enough, rock songs were good enough, three chords were good enough, and so depending on how you use those three chords and how you play and your tasty licks, that could be the makings of a great song. And so I've kind of stuck on that path ever since, because from the time I was 16 years old, I don't think I've been a better guitar player. Like, I learned everything I learned between the ages of 13 and 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly I think I've plateaued ever since. And part of that is just direction of your life and what you value. There was probably 8 years where I didn't pick up a guitar at some point, and just busy with other things. So, but I was very much into it at that time, and I think that is the time to get into it. And that's the age my kids are now, and I can see that their mind is just growing at such a exponential rate that this is the time to feed them the data and to get them practicing. And I did
build up their musical DNA.
Yeah, that's the most learning I did was at that age. So any kind of guitar playing that I think I'm any good at came from that, for sure, in terms of skill and versatility. Now, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I saw a video of you playing Telecaster. Is that your main instrument, or?
Yeah, no, I think my main instrument is my hollow body Gretsch. That's the one that I gig with and record with the most. The Telecaster is the workhorse that you can pick it up at any time and it'll do the job no matter what. Gretsch isn't suitable for some things. The Telecaster is suitable for everything. And I've played whole gigs with the Telecaster, but when it comes to those certain songs, the Gretsch is more applicable. It's just that I can't hit the high notes, the high part of the neck on the Gretsch, so I struggle with that. Whereas the Telecaster, I can solo with at least.
Have you ever used a Strat or a Les Paul, or that's just not your thing?
Yeah, I don't own them, but at the studio there's there's a Les Paul, and we've recorded with it, but we just don't keep it up, and we don't service it as much as we should. We had it reworked a couple years ago, and I did track quite a bit with it for the heavier stuff. Like, our band is kind of genre hopping sometimes, and some of the heavier stuff we'll utilize the proper gear like Marshalls and Les Pauls, but for the most part, if it's songs that I've written that are more of the core of the band, it's usually the Gretsch, and it's usually my little hot rod amp here, and then some leads with the Telecaster. But as far as Strat, I've never owned one. I wasn't a dedicated Strat guy. If I was a dedicated lead player in a blues band, then yeah, that's what I would do. But that's not who I am.
Yeah. Genre hopping, you say. What are some of those genres that So Dirty the Flamingos explores?
I think our first album was pretty country heavy, and that was just where I was at the time. And that was going to be the standalone project. I was going to do that and then go back to the other band and continue on, but things just grew out of this project in a way that we didn't foresee, and so the singer of the other band just kind of went his other way, I guess. He's probably a little mad that it went this way. I don't blame him. That was a country album, pretty much, but then there was one kind of rock pop song on it that didn't quite fit, but we didn't care. And then the next EP we did was a little bit more experimental country, I guess. And then the next one after that, I think we buried the rock stuff in our DNA for 2 albums, and that just came bubbling out, and so it was more of a rock record. All, mixed in with the other stuff, the roots rock and the country and the alt country, and it's a stew. It's just what flavors are coming out more. So that was the Bloodroot sessions, and that was I definitely had more of a rock vibe to it. I was leaning heavier on the heavier guitars, heavier drums. And then the next record after that was this last one, Ringer and the Dingus, and you heard Miles Away, so that's kind of the balance between all, I guess, pop, rock, country, and then there's the odd blues song too. So that's what it is. It's a mixture of all those genres that I love, that I can't separate one from the other sometimes, and that's what we get. Some albums are more leaning towards one than the other. But then there was a one-off song we did called Run If You Can, and it was definitely more of a shoegazer rock song from the 90s, which is also something I loved at the time, and that's how that came out. And so that was a single because it didn't fit with anything else we were doing, but it was something I liked, and so we did it. And here's the thing, is we don't have a record company or a management company telling us anything else, so if we feel like doing it, then we do it, and that's a nice feeling,
Yeah.
If
Well,
we wanted
of course,
to write
that's the
a
way
pop
it should
song, we
be.
could. Yeah,
Yeah.
it should be. And so I am happy about that. It doesn't make any money, but we have 100% creative control, which is nice. It really is.
Well, shoegaze and alt country are quite a bit removed from Eddie Van Halen. So
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
how did this transition take place? Like, when did you decide to pick up the pen and start songwriting?
That I'm pretty sure is specific to going to New York City as an exchange student. I was in art school, and I got this opportunity to go live in New York for a semester. And so I did that. And while I was there with no friends, right? And this is another key component to writing, is loneliness, right? Or
Solitude.
isolation. Yeah. So when I went to New York City with no friends, I was in my apartment, and I was exposed to the city for the first time. I'd never seen it before. No car, no money. So I spent my days either in school or wandering around Manhattan or Brooklyn and going to museums, because I had, as an art school student, you had carte blanche to all the museums in New York City. So I'm just feeding the brain with data the whole time I'm there. And when I had time alone or in a cafe, I was just writing, and spontaneous writing. And in art school, you learn some tricks of the trade, like how to write before the editor kicks in, getting all that stuff out. Usually morning exercises where you just wake up and write, free writes, and that way there's no editorial element, there's no critic, there's no anything, and so you get phrases and ideas and developments from your mind. Some of it is even unconscious because you're just waking up, and you turn that into something. And that's when I was doing that pretty heavily back then. And then go back to your apartment at night and excuse me, pick up the guitar and start putting this to song, which is the first time I did it. It was write a song. I was 23, I guess, which is pretty late for a lot of people.
Well, when you say writing, do you just mean like journaling, or did you have a conscious idea that that these are song lyrics, basically? Like, were you already thinking in terms of writing songs, or were you just, free associating in your journal?
Yeah, it was more of the exercise, the free association, the free write, the stream of consciousness stuff was not songs, but it did free up your ability to start to write songs. So I didn't start writing the lyrics until I had the chords. So once I had the chords, then I had this ability to conjure up the things that were on my mind and write the lyrics. I wasn't out on the streets writing lyrics per se, maybe sometimes, but I'm not sure. But just freeing yourself up to the idea of writing something, which I think is probably the biggest step. If any burgeoning songwriters are out there, probably the biggest thing is to have the confidence to to write something
Yeah.
personal or otherwise, and stand behind it. That's tough. That's the very first step, and I think that's what I'm talking about. Is that was the first step for me, was being in New York by myself, with being in the middle of this nerve center where it's feeding you ideas all day long, and what are you going to do with it? And as an art student, I was given some tools to be able to do something with it. So, and it came out as songs because I was a guitar player, and but also a different kind of guitar player where I wasn't playing licks or leads. I just had an acoustic and had to do something with that. So a mixture of all those things, and I came back to Vancouver where I was living with 10 or 12 songs that my buddy helped me record. So that was my first step. Yeah.
I remember one of those songs called Porno. Is that out? Is that still out there?
No.
That's a great one.
You're the only one.
Where can people hear that?
Oh my God. I don't even know. If you have a version, send it to me.
I probably do in email somewhere, an
Yeah, well, then I guess I
MP3 or
do
something.
too. Holy cow.
Where does that confidence or audacity come from? I mean, how dare we presume to write songs that we can stand behind and, boldly offer to the public? Like, is there some egotism, or why do we think it's necessary to share this gift, which, at times we might feel like nobody cares about? Like, why do we do it? Is there something wrong with us? I ask this because I've got a song on the new album called Pearls Before Swine, and so you can imagine what the theme is. The first couple lines are, is there anybody out there, and even if there is, do I really care? Why do I cast these pearls before swine? Like, what's wrong with us? I guess that's my question. Like, why are we doing this?
This is a perfect question because last night I was watching Fellini's 8.5, and if you remember it, the whole premise of the movie is why? Why are you making this movie? So the character is a famous filmmaker. He has all he needs to make this next film. He has a producer and an unlimited budget, and he has a string of starlets that are anxiously awaiting to play the roles. He just can't figure out what the film is.
Yeah.
And the dilemma, which it comes down to in the end, is why? Why am I even making a film? Am I good enough? Do I have anything to say? Why am I? And one of the lines that caught me was, why add chaos to chaos? Where do you come off thinking that you have something to deliver? And that's your question. And isn't that cut down right to the bone of who everybody is at any time, saying, who are you and what do you have to contribute? And I love that. I love that idea because I don't have an answer, but it's certainly something to talk about. Like, what makes you, and I guess the answer I was going to give you initially before I thought of Fellini was because we have to, because we have no choice. And that's it, egotist or not. When you have to, you have to. That's the state I've been in for my entire adult life, is I have to do this. I can't stop. I won't.
Yeah.
And if I did, I might as well die. And that's the reality. So however you make that work, and it's a struggle, no matter what, it's a struggle. Whether you do it full time and you are successful and you get paid for it, or like me, it's a part-time gig that you do on your borrowed and free time and you sacrifice sleep to do it. You have to. And that's the answer, I guess.
When did you realize that? Was it when you wrote those first songs in New York, or did you have that feeling before when you were, focused on being Eddie Van Halen? Did you know, maybe subconsciously even then, that you had this drive to create?
It came late for me, as all things do. I'm kind of a late bloomer in a lot of things, but that self-realization probably throughout my 20s, which is, I think, the time where you're really developing who you are, uh, meeting the responsibilities of life, going through those struggles, relationships, work, career, money, rent. When you have to go through all of that, you're going to finally learn who you are at some point. And for me, it was probably 30, 31, probably around the time I met you in South Korea, where I'd already done my education. Now I'm paying it off and really questioning what the fuck am I doing with my life that I'm going to be in debt for so long, to pay off a fine arts degree, to do what with, I don't know. But always writing and always making music and always making films or whatever it was that I was doing at any given time. Um, I I never stopped. I never stopped the art because you can't. You have to just be who you are. But at some point, you're going to take a look and go, okay, how is this going to actually work in my life? If I'm going to be married and have kids and have a job, which is something that happened, um, I segmented it off, and I'm sure that's the way for a lot of people as well. They just realize at some point, and I don't know when. Everybody's different, but for me, it was around that time where I went, okay, it's just going to have to be a part of my life, whether I lose sleep or not, and that's where we're at, 20 years later.
This reminds me of one of our Facebook chats. I'm going to just read from this because I was always impressed with the way you put it. You said, we're obviously on the same page as far as working tirelessly on the side for our art. Just keep at it, you told me. I have no hope of getting signed or blowing up the internet. I don't care. I love leaving good shit behind. But more than that, it feeds my soul just doing it. Writing, recording, once in a while. I even like the gigging. Not often. Leaving good shit behind. Is there any other reason to do it? I would say
Yeah,
no. I
no,
mean,
that's it.
whoever does it, whether, as you say, they're successful superstars or, relative nobodies like, I won't say like you, but like me. Um,
I accept that.
why are we doing it? To leave good shit behind, whether anyone cares or not. There is that I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but there's that inner drive and necessity, and the feeling that the certainty that it has to be done, because how could you not get it out?
Yeah. How could you not get it out? That's what it boils down to. It's either it's either in you and has to get out or not. And if it doesn't have to get out of you, then congratulations. You can just work and be happy and fulfilled. But there's
Hmm.
a number of us that are just, I don't want to say tortured, that's an overused word, but that just have to fulfill this no matter what they do. And I now realize that's the lot, that's what it takes.
So it is a kind of illness.
Yeah,
I think we've learned something important here. We're sick.
we're cancerous. We're doomed.
Yeah, we're toxic, and we have to, relieve ourselves of those toxins,
Yeah,
or
that's right.
we will be poisoned.
I have a very specific example, and so we're not a successful band by any stretch of the imagination, but we've managed to make these records and finish them, and now one song is done kind of well, more than I thought. And so Miles Away it was an easy song to write. It was an easy song to record. We got a new female vocalist, Sarah, who sang on it, who just elevated our sound so much that, I can't thank her enough. That all happened, but it was all relatively easy. There was no soul torturing, scraping of the edges of my innermost self to make this happen. But there's lots of songs like that where it just hurts to make, and you're met with struggles the entire time. And the previous record, there's a song called Woke Up in Sault Ste. Marie, and I've never been plagued by a song so hard than this one. A song that nobody's ever heard. Like, it didn't catch on. Nobody understands it. Nobody gets it. But I don't care. Like, I worked harder on that song than I worked on the rest of the record. And Adam and I editing drums, quantizing and redoing the guitars 6 times, and just to get it right, just so that song is the one I want on that record, sounding the way that it does. It killed me, and nobody heard it. And that's the lot. So, and you have to accept that, and that's just the way it is. And I'm not bitter. I'm not angry about it, because I love that. I love that song. I love that I did it, and I love that I carried through with the vision of it from the beginning. Even if it doesn't have any streams or anything, I don't care. It's that's a good example of what we're faced with in this day. As an artist, you're gonna kill yourself over one that won't see the light of day, and there's some that just come out like nothing and they'll thrive. I can't explain it. It's just the way it is.
Well, but surely there are certain things you can point to explain the success of Miles Away, right? Like, what did you do in terms of promotion? You say it was played on the radio. How did that come about?
There's a rock station. So you have to understand Toronto. It's called the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, which is another way of saying 5 cities at one point decided to become one city for economic reasons. But all those little cities, and I live in one of them, Etobicoke, that's where I'm here right now. They all had their own individual cultures and identities before they became the GTA. Well, the rock station that played our song is from Oshawa. Oshawa is like very blue collar, to the east end of the city, really far away. It takes an hour to get there, but it's considered part of the GTA, right? Or it's in the area. Oshawa picked up Bloodroot Sessions, the album before this, and played the entire album over the week, one song every night, and with a big long intro. And that was a really nice thing for us, because it was getting our music to the people that probably identified with it the most, which is, hardworking people that just want to relax on their way home and listen to something that's classic rock oriented, but not roots rock, a little bit country. So, and I was really thankful for that. So that happened with that first album. And when I reached out to the DJ, say, hey, we got a new release, they grabbed onto the single and played that every night for, I think it was 2 weeks. So I noticed that as soon as they did that, our Spotify started to climb. And then when it started to climb, it kicks in these algorithms, and then the algorithms kick into others. At the same time, I was really plaguing all the Spotify playlists and trying to get them to play as many as possible. And that seemed to work too. And that was on the 10,000, 20,000 streams. And in concert with that, those promotions seemed to really kick in. And now it just reached 100,000 streams last week, which is nice. I don't know how many people are really listening and liking and re-listening. I'd like to think there are some, but I don't know. But I think people
you never know with those stats, do you?
How could you know? And who cares, right? Like, it's done, it's released, and if people enjoy it, great. But it's out of my hands. It's just something I wrote, and I'm gonna write more. So that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
But the question, was why do I think it's more successful than the others? And I think it comes down to the balance of voices. Sarah Menke, who joined the band right before. That was the first song we recorded together, and it was kind of magical when she first walked in the studio. And she had the demo. She listened to it a few times. She started to sing it, and with a very little coaching, we realized she's not a backup singer on this song. She's it's more along the lines of a duet. All we're doing is singing the same notes together, but hers and my voice really ring well together and speak to the song. So that was nice and fortuitous. Like, I didn't expect it.
Right. Well, Spotify, YouTube, how do you feel about the way that most people listen to music these days? I mean, when we were coming up, it was LPs, cassettes, and CDs a little bit later. But now, with these streaming platforms, what has that done to music? Like, is this a welcome development, or I guess there's nothing we can do about it, but
No.
how do we navigate this? Like, what is the best way? I still don't know what's the best way as an independent artist to, release music. Like, I have a distributor. I work with Symphonic, and I've got a remix album that was done like over a year ago. I haven't released it yet because I still can't decide what I want to do with it and how many platforms I want to release it on. Like, is it best to go wide and just share it everywhere, or is it better to focus on specific platforms? I know that's a pretty
Okay.
open-ended question, but what are your thoughts on that?
I really don't know. All I can say is, as a consumer myself, right? If I'm making dinner in my kitchen and I tell my little kitchen robot to play any song that I feel like listening to, it does. So last night I'm making lasagna and I asked my kitchen robot to play King Crimson, and it does. So that's kind of nice, right? Like, when you think about that, I have a lot of negative things to say about Spotify and these, especially that one, that are paying their artists 0.0003 cents per stream.
Exactly.
Like, in what world does that make sense? That the artist is getting 0.0003 cents, and even 5 years before Spotify, not 5 years, before, a year before Spotify came out, we released an album as the other band, and we got paid $1 per song because
Hmm.
that was iTunes, and iTunes was the ruler of the day. And we were all bitching about getting paid $1 per song when within a year it went down to 0.0003 cents.
Yeah.
So here we are. Is it going to get better? No. Why? In what world would that get better? There's no schematic for the artist getting paid more. So what we have is way too many artists adding chaos to chaos, right? Adding their silly little self-indulgent songs like mine to a world that has way too many artists and songs on Spotify, and all the algorithms in the world will always lead you to Taylor Swift. That's it. And that's the reality. But like I said, if I can make lasagna in my kitchen and listen to King Crimson and then say, no, I don't want King, I want Beethoven. And then I listen to Beethoven and then, no, I want Joe Jackson. And then I'm listening to Joe Jackson. I'll take it. That's it. I'm not going to fight it anymore because there's no fight. There's nothing I can do to fight this system, unfortunately. But I've read a lot about Spotify and their antics over the years, and it is all bad. It is
Yes.
all terrible for the artist. There's no support whatsoever. So, and that's it. If you're going to be a musician, if you're going to be a songwriter, get a job and pay and be that songwriter and be that musician on the side. That's there's nothing else for it. Don't not do it. Just do it and know that you're doing it for its own sake. You're never
Yeah.
going to get paid for it. That's the reality for 99.9% of us,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, what about alternatives like Bandcamp, or there's a Icelandic distribution platform that I've been researching. Um, you know what I'm talking about? I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's like Bandcamp. You know Bandcamp, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever thought about
It,
putting your stuff there, because your compensation is much much greater than what you would receive from Spotify royalties, obviously.
yeah, I guess the problem there is that people aren't making lasagna in their kitchen and saying, "Kitchen robot, can you play So Dirty the Flamingos on Bandcamp?" That's not happening um, until it claws its way up into the streaming universe. It's not going to do much for me. Uh, I I've tried it. I hadn't had much success, and so I just use my distributor. My distributor takes it to all those streaming places, and then I went after where I thought I would get the most traction, which was Spotify. So that's where we're at. Um, I long for a day where there's some justice in the music world in terms of paying the artists for their work. But in the absence of that, all I can say is that if you're going to do this, if you're going to be a musician and be an artist, then you better not be doing it for the money. And if you were doing it for the money, does that necessitate better art? I don't know. Do we need to support every artist out there, or does the artist have to claw and clamor to get some good work out there because they need to get it out there? That's a good argument too, right?
Mm. Well, there's so much more to talk about, but we're bumping up on an hour here, so maybe we should wrap things up. Is there any insight you can leave us with?
Um, no, I mean we really we really got to some philosophical moments there, which I wasn't expecting, which is nice. Just the truth of it and the reality of it and where we're at and why you do what you do and all of that. It's important to talk about because I certainly didn't have a beacon when I was younger getting into this to talk about these kinds of things. It wasn't until I met people like you, um, just growing up. And when I say growing up, I was 30, right? And and you get out of your world. I got out of Canada and met you in South Korea, and you kind of measure yourself against others and measure yourself against your new self and to learn what is possible and what you should do and what you can do and what you might do. And it was all just very heady for me at the time, and I'm super appreciative of that. So I guess if anything, go travel and go gig and go tour and go and do all those things, and know there's no money in it at all, and you're gonna have to do it and struggle. But what you learn is going to set you up for life in that sense, in that you're going to know why you're doing it. And isn't that ultimately what we're about? We have to figure out why we are who we are and what we're doing. I think so.
And perhaps to add our own personal chaos to the generalized chaos that
Yeah.
is our world.
Yeah, because that chaos filters down to somebody somewhere. It really does.
Our chaos can resonate with someone else's.
Well, have you ever discovered a weird band and felt connected to it? And you had no reason to discover that band. They just happened upon you, and you walked into a bar one night, or it plays on some university radio station, and it just goes, "Oh, that's some that's a little bit of me out there," or something that I understand, or something I relate to.
Yeah.
That's the peripheral of why we do what we do. That's not the reason we do it, but there is a peripheral, and there's a trickle down that you might influence somebody else, and that chaos links to more chaos. Good stuff.
Maybe there is someone out there after all. So keep casting those pearls before swine.
Yeah.
I'm doing a little bit of self promotion to tease the new single coming out, but hey, it's my podcast, so why can't I?
Yeah. I can't wait to hear it again, or hear it for the first time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you'll come back and chat with us again. Maybe we can get into more specific issues, but this was a great general overview of your career as a songwriter, and we all thank you for your insights and your wisdom and your deep reflections on this mysterious craft that we find ourselves engaged in.
Yeah, that haunts us. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's nice to see you again. Let's do it
Good
again.
to see you
anytime.
too. All right. Take care.
Take care, my friend.